A-Rod. So this, and I'll leave a link if possible. This site webpage tells the story of how it originally appeared on the Wingmaker's website about how it ended up being a 24-room chamber was found in Chaco Canyon. And basically, in 1972, in a remote section of northern New Mexico, a group of hikers, they discovered an unusual artifact and pictographs within an obscure canyon. An archaeologist from the University of New Mexico analyzed the artifact and searched the area where it was discovered, but found no signs that a prehistoric culture had established any permanent site in the canyon. So it was presumed that a nomadic Native American Indian tribe had occasionally used the canyon as a temporary settlement and had left behind a few artifacts of their presence as a consequence. There were, however, two very puzzling questions. All but one of the artifacts could be dated to the 8th century A.D. All but one. The exception, which is known as the compass artifact, which they later said they thought it was a homing device for an extraterrestrial being or something. But the exception, known as the compass artifact, appeared to be an unusual form of technology and was found among more typical artifacts like pottery and simple tools. We're talking about a compass, a metal compass. The compass was covered in strange hieroglyphic symbols, some of which were also found on the pottery. Secondly, the pictographs that were found in the area had inexplicably appeared, and they were strikingly different than any of the other native petroglyphs or rock art found in the Southwest or the entire continent, for that matter. Because of these two anomalies, the artifacts and the entire project quickly became the property of the U.S. government, of course, or more specifically, the National Security Agency. It was decided that these artifacts might suggest a prehistorical extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and that the NSA had the appropriate agenda and wherewithal to initiate a full-scale scientific expedition to determine the nature and significance of the site. The site was completely searched by a secret department of the NSA in 1973, but it only resulted in a few additional findings, and none of them were designated as technologies of evidence or evidence of an extraterrestrial presence, etc., etc. Experts were called in to help, but it was impossible to reach a consensus as to what the pictographs meant. As quickly as the project had risen as priority investigation, it fell into the archives of the NSA under the codename Ancient Arrow. However, 21 years later, in 1994, a series of rock slides opened up a section of the Ancient Arrow site. The canyon was in a naturally obscure section of park and held by the state of New Mexico. After its discovery in 1972, it had been officially sanctioned off limits to hikers and campers and was to be left in its natural state. From time to time, scientists sponsored by the NSA would visit the site hoping to uncover new evidence, but were invariably disappointed. Shortly after the rock slide occurrence, a small team of operatives from the NSA visited Ancient Arrow Canyon to do some follow-up research. They discovered the rock slide had exposed an entrance to a hidden cavern that led deep within the canyon walls. At the back of this cavern, the research team discovered a well-hidden entrance into the interior of the canyon wall or rock structure of the Ancient Arrow site. There they found a system of tunnels and chambers that had been carved out from solid rock. There were a total of 23 chambers, all intricately connected. Ended up being 24 though, guys. All intricately connected to an interior corridor, and each chamber held a specific wall painting, series of pictographs, written hieroglyphs, and what seemed to be dormant alien technologies. Let's see here. Once this entrance to the cave was found, a report was immediately filed with the director responsible for the Ancient Arrow project. The project was then formally brought under the jurisdiction of the Advanced Contact Intelligence Organization, which organized an interdisciplinary research team to assess the exact nature of the site and attempt to discover additional artifacts or evidence of an extraterrestrial visitation. The artifacts found at the ancient Aerosite, I skipped over a paragraph. The artifacts found at the ancient Aerosite were virtually incomprehensible to the research team. There were many mysteries. Why would an advanced culture leave their artifacts in such a precise and seemingly ordered manner? What was the message they were trying to leave behind? What were their technologies? Why did they leave them behind? Did the creators of the site intermingle with the native tribes or remain an isolated culture? Who were they and why were they here in the 8th century? Were they planning to return? These were only some of the mysteries that challenged the research team. Throughout the 7 months of restoration and cataloging, there's a picture. Throughout the 7 months of restoration, cataloging, and analysis, the Ancient Arrow project was a complete enigma. More of the energy went into the safe preservation of the artifacts rather than attempting to solve the puzzle of their existence, though speculations were a topic of every conversation. Gradually, a hypothesis was structured by the research team that an extraterrestrial culture established an Earth colony in the 8th century and isolated itself within the ancient Arrow Canyon. They brought with them a very precise mission to leave behind a massive time capsule that would prove to be discovered in the late 20th century. While the exact nature of the time capsule was unclear to the research team, it seemed probable that it was a cultural exchange of some kind and had no invasive intent to Earth or its people. That's light language, by the way. It took a team of researchers nearly 2 years after the restoration was completed to decipher a partial meaning of the chamber artifacts. 2 years. The 23 separate chambers seemed to be linked together to form some specific message or purposeful mission. In the 23rd and final chamber, there's 24 though, people. There are 24 now. They recovered a small optical disc that was presumed to hold digital information that could be the key to deciphering the artifacts. Scientists eagerly analyzed the disc, but they could not figure out how to access its content. The ACIO's finest computer experts were called in to try to unlock the encoded disc, but to no avail. Several more months were spent trying every conceivable method to access the contents of the disk, but nothing worked. The Ancient Arrow project, for the first time in nearly a year, had hit a dead end, and funding for the project was rapidly weaned by the ACIO. After 2 more months of unsuccessful efforts, it was decided that the technology to access the disk was simply not available. Remember, this is 1997-98. The optical disc and all of the artifacts and findings would be carefully placed in secure storage until the technologies were available to unlock the disc and harvest its content. It was presumed that the disc held star charts, translation indexes, glossaries, and all the answers to the various mysteries of its creators, and perhaps more importantly, their intentions for Earth. Now, eventually, it was decoded by one person. Only one person on this Earth could decode it, and that's Dr. Anderson, Dr. Ruda. It has different names, James Mahu, perhaps. While the optical disc was considered to be the key to unlocking the meaning of the time capsule, the ACIO had little choice but to place the project into storage and await the arrival of technologies that would permit them to unlock the disk. However, there were 2 scientists from the research team who theorized that the disk could be unlocked by understanding the meaning of the wall paintings. The wall paintings came alive in each of the 23 chambers. In their minds, it was not a complex technological solution, but rather a language or translation solution that would unlock the disk. After much persuasion, the ACIO agreed to allow the two researchers to assemble a replica of the time capsule's contents. The replica time capsule consisted of detailed drawings and photographs of all the artifacts from each of the 23, they're 24 now, including detailed high-resolution photographs of the wall paintings. The two scientists would be allowed to continue their research on their own time, provided they maintained utmost secrecy and reported all of their findings directly to the ACIO division head and project director. There's a group called the Labyrinth Group that was above the ACIO, and the ACIO didn't even know the Labyrinth Group existed, so there's more to the story. It's so fascinating, but y'all have to do your research. Go to the Wingmakers websites. It's amazing. The optical disc was securely stored away in a vault within the ACIO. The project was officially put on indefinite hold, and all personnel associated with the project were reassigned with promotions to different projects. Now later on this website, it gives 3 top secret documents that were written by the colleagues of Dr. Anderson, who was the guy who knows how to speak and knows of 10 or 20 extinct languages, who can speak fluently all these. He's a language expert. I think he's an extraterrestrial. He's the only person that could decode this artifact. It's like a disc that, a disc that they left over 1,000 years ago in the time capsule, but a disc that could be in our computers or something. Digital disc with digital music, digital information, but left 1,000 years ago. Amazing. The Ancient Era project was not to be spoken of again until which time the technologies or some other means provided a way to unlock the optical disc and access its contents. The scientists spent nearly 5 months in partnership trying unsuccessfully to decode the Ancient Era artifacts and establish the means to unlock the optical disc. All the information, all the materials, the poetry, the music, the philosophy writings that is on the Wingmakers website, that's eventually what got decoded. But during the writing of this, Okay. During this time, the ACIO regularly experimented with new technologies or methods, and they too were unsuccessful in unlocking the content of the optical disc. One day, late in the summer of 1996, one of the scientists, this is cool, a linguistic expert, had an insight into how to unlock the optical disc by reducing the symbols of the wall paintings to their closest facsimile found in an ancient Sumerian text. While the Sumerian language is extinct, it was sufficiently comprehensible to this scientist that he was able to decode the symbols of the paintings, and placing the 23 words in the same order as the ancient arrow chambers, he was able to finally unlock the optical disc. The connection between the Sumerian language and the time capsule was a breakthrough the ACIO team had been waiting for. A simple set of 23 words elicited over 8,000 pages of data from the optical disc. Unfortunately, the data was incomprehensible because there was no character set in the computer that could emulate the hieroglyphs and unusual symbols of the language. Thus, a translation index needed to be developed, which took an additional 6 months. Finally, once a translation index was programmed into the computer, the data, while it could be printed out or viewed on the monitor in its hieroglyphic form, still required translation to English. If my video runs out, I will continue this. And this translation process was extremely tedious and could not be facilitated through computers, owing to the subtlety of the language and its intricate connection to the wall paintings and pictographic representations elsewhere within the ancient Aerosite. So a computer couldn't do it. You needed to have there's subtlety to the language, a connection to the wall paintings that actually come alive and move and things like that, some kind of spiritual connection. So a computer couldn't do it. It took Anyway, as partial translations began to be developed, it was determined that even within the optical disc, there was a segmentation of the data into 23 units. Each unit appeared to correspond to a specific chamber. As the first two chambers began to be translated, it was further shown that each unit contained philosophical and scientific papers, poetry, music, and an introduction to the culture and identity of its creators. The creators of the time capsule referred to themselves as wingmakers. They represented a future version of humanity who lived some 750 years in our future. They claimed to be culture bearers, or ones that bring the seeds of art, science, and philosophy to humanity. They had left behind a total of 7 time capsules in various parts of the world to be discovered according to a well-orchestrated plan. Their apparent goal was to help the next several generations of humans develop a global culture, a unified system of philosophy, science, and art. In early 1997, the ACIO scientist who had originally discovered the access code for the optical disc became strangely sympathetic with the Wingmakers' mission. He was convinced that the ACIO would never share their discovery with the public, and he was certain that it was too significant to withhold. He also claimed that he was in communication with the Wingmakers, and that they were watching the ACIO's progress and would, at the appropriate time, make the time capsule and its contents available to the public. And since 1997-98, slowly the Wingmakers have been putting more and more information out there, and more, sharing more and more of the sites that were found, and so forth. Anyway, the assertion troubled the ACIO, and particularly the Ancient Errant Project director, who eventually recommended a leave of absence for the scientist and was summarily dispatched from the project. The scientist was afraid that his memories would be tampered with. We're talking about Dr. Anderson, Dr. Neruda. He was afraid his mind was going to be wiped or something, so he defected, and he befriended a person who would actually get this material out for him before he thought his mind was going to be wiped. Anyway, the scientist was afraid that his memories would be tampered with or destroyed altogether, and so he defected from the ACIO, quite literally for the first to ever do so. But it's a Labyrinth Group, too. There's just so much to this, you guys. Soon after his defection, the scientist disappeared. However, before his disappearance, some of his materials regarding the Wingmakers and their time capsule were given to a journalist that he had selected at random. The author of this document is that journalist. I am in possession of photographs, music, poetry, artwork, translation indexes, copies of secret documents, and a variety of translated philosophical texts that all stem from the Ancient Arrow Project. I've taken every precaution to remain anonymous so I can't be traced. I'm convinced that these materials are released against the wishes of a secret organization that probably has powers that even our government is unaware of. Wow. Just on and on. I'm going to let you guys go to this and read the rest yourself. She says she's never been involved in any story approaching this magnitude. Dr. Anderson warned her that the ACIO has an advanced version of a technology based on what he called remote viewing. As she understands it, remote viewing is the ability to ascertain the whereabouts of people through some sort of psychic insight by someone trained in this technology. She says she knows it sounds far-fetched, etc., etc. And Dr. Anderson was insistent that they had this capability and that it was one of their most feared technologies by those within the ACIO. In effect, it was known to keep their personnel loyal, Unfortunately, this will force her to stay underground and remain very mobile. She says, believe me, this whole story seems impossible, but I can only tell you that I've seen detailed drawings and photographs of the artifacts taken from the ancient Aerosite, and these are most assuredly, to her eyes, not of this time or world. They're unlike anything she's ever seen. Either the wing makers are real, or someone has gone to a lot of trouble to convince me otherwise, she says. And again, she says I'm a simple journalist without any axe to grind relative to secret government operations, ETs, time travel, or alien artifacts. I'm not here to convert anyone. There is nothing to convert to. I simply want to disclose this material and let each individual absorb it as they choose. I will add additional documents and artifacts from ancient Aerosite when I feel it's safe to do so. But for now, there's enough material on this site to introduce anyone to the culture of the wingmakers. I hope you take time to immerse yourself in these materials. If you do, you may be surprised at the result. This was written October 23rd, 1998. And the Wingmakers website has evolved and so forth. But it's just so much to know. Just so much. You guys are going to have to do your own digging. I can't believe it. There's interview transcripts on this one. Anne's journal findings. And there's actually the memorandums that are posted here on this site are the original uncensored memos written by colleagues of Dr. Anderson, the only person that could decode and figure out what the optical disc said. 3 representative memos have been posted at this time. They provide an insight into ACIO and Labyrinth Group. The ACIO didn't even know the Labyrinth Group existed, as to how they view the time capsule and interrelate among themselves. Additional memos may be posted in the future. For strategic reasons, they have been withheld at this time. And then you can actually go into a different part of this website and go read the these memorandums that are top secret. Supposedly they were anyway. Wingmakers Ancient Arrow Project from the desk of Jeremy Southers, classified document number 040297-14X-P1788-23. To the Labyrinth Group members, you guys can learn what the Labyrinth Group are. They didn't share their stuff with the ACIO. The ACIO didn't know the Labyrinth Group existed in one part of the story. Based on all of the available research of the ancient Arrow time capsule, Wingmakers seem to represent themselves as a future aspect of the human race from a time approximately 750 years in their future. They represent a version of humanity that has comprehension of the universal systems that govern existence, or at least the laws of time and space. This understanding permits the Wingmakers to travel back in time and interact with humankind at various points in its evolutionary pathway. I would speculate that Wingmakers have throughout history been variously referred to as angels, gods, spirit guides, and in some instances, extraterrestrials. They imply that they are adept at subtly interacting with humankind in order to evolve its understanding of the cosmological environment in which life evolves and transforms. It goes on and on and on. So that's one of the secret documents, and there's 2 more. But anyway, I hope that helps, Rod. There's so much. I know that wasn't a great reading, but anyway, this one is wingmakers.us. They say this is one of the original websites. But interestingly enough, on this iPad that is from the government, when you bring it up on, well, it doesn't even matter. It shows some different stuff. So anyway, there's a start. Love you. Have a great night. Talk to you later. And love and light. Everything's all right. Love you guys. Bye.